Georgia and founder Lucy to tell us all about sexual wellness.
Right. Can everyone hear us at the back? Yes? I will take your silence as a yes, which is not a thing that we should normally do. But
we never do that.
Yeah, we never do that. So hi everyone, thank you so much for coming along tonight, and thank you also to the amazing QUT Guild for putting on this event, which has been phenomenal, and to Cheeky Waffles for their incredible contribution to this evening. So if you haven't tried one already, please do go and have a nibble of a cheeky waffle. To introduce us, I'm Lucy, I'm the founder of Normal, and we as a business and as a sort of an educational movement try to make it really easy for you to have the conversations that you missed out on in sex education, and make it really easy to get the information you need to explore sex and relationships in a way that feels good for you. And I work with the wonderful Georgia Grace, who's also at G-Spot on Instagram as our in-house sex coach really frequently. Georgia, do you want to tell us a little about you?
Yeah, so if you've never heard of a sex coach before, you're probably not the only person. It's not your average job. But basically, I work in session with individuals and couples. I run events, kind of like this. Actually, I haven't done a lot of live events lately. It's so nice to be with humans in real life. And actually, one of my favorite parts of the job is to work with Normal, where we create online sex ed courses. We've just developed a whole new range of toys, which we'll be releasing soon, as well as, just working with universities and some really great organizations too. So tonight, I think we're going to go through some of the most common questions that we're asked, but also based on the feedback that we got from you and the uni, so that we can give you some really useful information. Before we jump into that, it could be useful to go through some of our agreements. And I think, wow, that's so bright. I'll just sit like this. So in terms of agreements, it's likely that this is the first time you've had the opportunity to speak about sex. And that can be really exciting and useful, but at times it can also feel pretty radical or challenging. So if at any point you need to take a break, go outside, get a waffle, go to the bathroom, please. This isn't supposed to be like the sex ed you had in high school with that PE teacher. We want it to be useful and fun, so make sure you regulate yourselves. And we also like to create a space where you can respect and even listen to some of those boundaries, which is maybe not an opportunity that society always provides for. So there will be discussions of consent and sex. Do regulate yourselves. If you need support after, please come and speak to either of us, or I'm sure anyone who has supported in sort of creating this event. I am going to move forward because how's your face? It is so bright.
Up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. There you go. That's better.
Awesome. And, in the first part of this session, we'll talk to you about some of those kind of top topics that come up a lot when people are starting their experiences with sexuality and relationships. So we'll work through consent. We'll talk about orgasm and arousal. We'll talk about how desire and libido work, and we'll also talk a bit about modern dating and some of the areas where we get lots of questions. But the most important and hopefully the most fun part of tonight as well is being able to answer questions that come from you. So if you haven't already had a chance to submit a question, I think there's a piece of paper going around and a collection bowl. Oh, louder?
Louder.
Louder. Awesome. Okay. We'll make sure we're much louder. But there's pieces of paper going around. There'll be a collection bowl. So please feel free to submit anything that you would like us to speak to. And that can be about sex, dating, relationships, intimacy, confidence, whatever those things are that are on your mind. We're really happy to speak to those as well. Awesome.
Also, my pronouns are she, her.
As are mine. And always important to begin with that. I think it just, one of the things that we often are asked is why is it important to start with pronouns? And it's, firstly, it's good manners, but secondly, in using pronouns at the start of any presentation, it actually makes it easy for someone whose pronouns, for example, aren't, traditionally cisgendered, to not feel like they're having to announce themselves and be the only person in the room every time. So we always default to saying, hey, we're, she, her pronouns, and give everyone the chance to do that as well. And we also wanted to echo the acknowledgement of country that was given before. We're really pleased to be here today and pleased to be working and teaching and conversing with you on this beautiful land as well. So, shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Awesome.
We've done that.
Oh yeah, who are we? Who are we? All good. Consent. So Georgia, I know that I think consent is a topic that has rightfully been in the news over the last year, has been something where we're seeing incredible movements pioneered by really amazing young people from our parliament to our schools to our universities. But I think a lot of people often struggle with how do I practically implement that in my everyday relationships? How do I put that into practice? How do I be a really good partner and sort of practice the best version of consent interactions? And so I think that's something that you can speak to really well.
This is a huge part of the work that I do, and it's not just with school students or uni students, it's really with all of my clients, and the ages really go from 18 to 70. I think consent is, of course, essential in all sexual experiences. So I would define consent as the verbal and non-verbal communication that ensures that everyone is excited about being there and free to leave whenever they want. It is ongoing in the sense that you may agree to something at the start, and then when you're doing it, it might not be as exciting or fulfilling or pleasurable as you thought that might be. So we need to talk before, during, and after. Often I think that when we talk about consent, people will say, have you given consent? Do you give consent? And I see the premise in that, but I actually think consent is something that you co-create. It's something that you arrive at. And it's something that we really all have the responsibility, because if we're looking at sex being fun and pleasurable and making sure it's the best thing possible, like, wouldn't everyone want everyone involved to be consenting and excited about being there? And I think that, it is really exciting that we're now seeing policy, education in schools change to reflect the demand that everyone is sort of acknowledging that we need to learn these vital skills from a really young age. And yeah, there are some really practical things that you can do to learn about this. Maybe if you go to the next slide. I love your acronym that you speak to.
So one of the things that I think, perfect, thanks. One of the things that I think can be really helpful in framing discussions about consent is to say, yes, obviously, the things that we heard in school that are relatively simplistic slogans like no means no, obviously those things are true, but it can be helpful to get a little bit more into the nuances. So Planned Parenthood in the US created a really great acronym to summarize this, which is FRIES. So FRIES, which speaks to some of the nuances of consent that are worth thinking about. So F means freely given. So, we're talking about a situation where no one feels pressured or feels like there is any sort of negative consequences to speaking their mind and letting someone know how they feel. We're talking about consent being R, which is reversible. So the notion, I think, that we need to kind of get around there is that, you might start an interaction with someone feeling really excited, and perhaps at some point, those feelings change, or you want to pause, you want to slow down, you want to stop. Those are all perfectly normal and natural and awesome pieces of consent. So being able to say, actually, consent doesn't extend over the course of an interaction. Consent pauses when you want it to pause. Consent being informed, so you know what's going to happen, and you both discussed it and sort of agreed on it. Consent being enthusiastic, so we want consent to be something where you're really fucking excited, and that should be like an important part of how we're thinking about sex. And also being specific, so it refers to a specific thing. There is no carte blanche when it comes to sex and relationships. You might have consented to one form of sex, one type of interaction, but that doesn't mean that you've consented to anything else in that. So if you want to move on to something else, it should be a discussion, or at least a kind of conversation where you're looking at verbal and non-verbal signals to make sure that someone is enthusiastically super into it. And one thing that I really love, Georgia, that you, I think, bring up a lot in this is that, people will come to us with a question that's like, these conversations about consent, I'm very much behind it. I don't know how to implement it in a way that feels sexy, natural, and fun in the moment. How do I do that? I feel really clunky. Should I be making someone sign a document? So I think it can be really helpful to actually speak to, maybe why clunkiness can be good, but also what are some practical things that you can use in that situation?
Ultimately, I think sex is awkward. Like there's bodies that are potentially naked, potentially swapping some fluids. Like it will get awkward and it will feel clunky at times, especially if you're learning a new skill, like communicating, talking, asking for what you want, discussing consent. That can feel clunky, and I guess it's okay to be in that, as sort of much as we're fed this idea that when you're attracted to someone, you just sort of roll around the walls and your clothes come off at perfect times and your bodies just fit into the right places and you come at the same time.
30 seconds simultaneously, always.
Everyone comes and it's just, looks great in a movie, but not necessarily the reality of what sex can look and feel like. So awkwardness, I think we all can get a little bit more comfortable with the clunkiness. Just the other day I was working with a couple and they were identifying that they had absolutely no idea how to ask for what they want, to communicate, or even to really know what they were looking for. And that's a really common thing that people come up against. It's like, how do I ask for what I want, or how do I say no to something if I don't know? And there's a great game called the yes, no, can I have more information game. And how you would set it up is however many people are involved, sitting, looking at each other, and one person will ask, can I touch you in this way? Or can I kiss you? Can you touch me in this way? Really a request, anything that they're wanting. This person has the opportunity to feel into it. For them, it might be a, yes, absolutely, let's do that. I'm so keen for that. It might be a, oh, can I have more information? What would that look like? Where would it be? How much pressure would that involve? And it might be a no. And if it's a no, this person will say, thank you. And then you move on. So it's that opportunity to feel into what is exciting, maybe practice voicing things, hearing a response, being able to really describe what it is that you're wanting to receive, but also this really important part around hearing a no, that it can suck, absolutely suck, when someone says no to you. And I think that, it can feel really, really vulnerable when you've asked for something that you're wanting to receive. But no matter how bad it feels, you can't convince, coerce, or persuade someone into doing that thing for you. So when you say thank you to someone's no, it shows them that you've heard, you're respecting them, you're listening to them, and you're acting upon that. And it also shows you that, a boundary is not necessarily a rejection of who you are as an individual. It's more a piece of information as to either what is possible. And say, for example, this couple that I was working with, a no was really useful to create this framework. And, oh, okay, that's the no. We're not interested in that, but all of this stuff, this is really exciting for us. And then, of course, in other contexts, a no might be, okay, let's move on. We're not right for each other, this is not the right setting, there's nothing else that's going to happen here. So the yes, no, maybe game, as well as a few other resources. I don't know if we can go about sharing resources after. Actually, we've got a whole course.
Yeah, we do have a whole course.
And it's free, so uni life, get onto that. It's it will have all of these amazing sort of resources and practices and skills. And you can access it via Normal's website. So yeah, I think there are a few things that I'm particularly liking working with at the moment with my clients.
Absolutely, and I really just I wanted to kind of celebrate that. I think being able to celebrate hearing no and being a supportive and awesome partner when you hear that, that is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and something that we need to be able to kind of talk more about as well. Mm-hmm. Why don't we jump on to, and there's so much more that we can talk about with consent, so if you do have questions, if you do have feedback, if you have anything around those topics that you want to hear more on, again, feel free to submit it as a question or email it through to us or come up to us afterwards, whatever format is comfortable for you. But why don't we move on to modern dating, which is something that particularly comes up a lot when we're speaking at universities. So, Georgia, what are some of the things that you hear about modern dating?
Oh, especially at the moment. Okay, I also want to know, you don't have to say anything, but, let me know. You can say something too.
Let me know with your eyes.
Yeah, or your nods. So after the lockdowns that we've had, everyone has had this kind of fatigue when it comes to using the apps. You're scrolling, seeing the same person. One of my clients joined the apps again and she was like, they're still here. How have you been? What have you been up to? But also it has been really, really tricky to date for very obvious reasons. And I think that we kind of solved this idea of the hot vac summer. Everyone was going out, doing lots of fun, sexy things. And then it got to it. And, collectively there was a little bit of anxiety. Everyone lost some of those really important flirting or dating skills, because I really do think that dating is a skill, and many of us feel like we've been out of practice. And there just haven't really been the opportunities. Plus, people have had that introspective time to go inside themselves and think, actually, I'm really comfortable to just go home after a long day at uni or a long day at work and chill out, put on some Netflix, whip out a toy, and have some me time. So, yeah, I think if you're dating at the moment, I'm noticing a lot of challenges that people are facing. What about you? What are you hearing?
I think that's absolutely true, and we've done like a fairly large amount of research on the brand where we asked like 1,000 Australians what were your experiences of sex, dating and relationships in lockdown, and some of the stats that we heard were things like 1% of people who dated during the lockdowns ended up in a long-term relationship. The strongest responses coming out of the pandemic weren't, I'm really excited and I just want to get back out there. They were like, I'm feeling anxious, my body's changed and I'm not feeling confident, I don't know how to flirt anymore, I don't know how to have sex anymore. I'm not necessarily, it was a mixture of a little bit of anticipation, but a lot of anxiety. And so I think if you're experiencing those things, that's really normal, and that it's okay to kind of sort of sit with those feelings, validate those feelings, and figure out what path makes sense for you back into dating if that's something that you're interested in. I think also more broadly, we live in this really interesting time where, the combination of social media and dating apps has totally changed what it looks and feels like to date. And I think live in an interesting time where we haven't necessarily reset, what is good etiquette? What is the right way to date? What is a polite or respectful or a mature way to engage in these processes? And so I think for a lot of people, there can be this sense of pressure to go out there and enjoy things like dating apps, but also a sense that actually those can often be quite sort of alienating spaces. They can be things that undermine your self-esteem. They can be experiences that feel like a lot of rejection or uncertainty. Almost everyone we speak to has an experience of being ghosted. Almost everyone we speak to has an experience of sort of less than respectful conduct in modern dating. And so I think as well, there's a really as a generation that is more and more aware of mental health and how we take care of ourselves and how we take care of others, there's a lot of really interesting work that's going to happen over the next few years that's about, well, what are the norms that we all want to kind of emerge from this period with about what healthy dating looks like, and how to take care of yourself in that. And there's some things that I think can be really helpful with that. Do you mind maybe just going forward, one more, and then we can go back.
Jump around.
Yeah, but one of the things that we've found is really helpful for a lot of people, if you're thinking about dating, casual sex, anything that's outside of that more kind of stable long-term relationship model, and that we can all have different periods of our lives, or indeed our whole lives, where we want those things or we want long-term relationships. So it's really important to acknowledge that these aren't transitional phases for anyone. These can be, beautiful, awesome, lifelong ways to engage with sex and relationships. But one of the things that I think can be really valuable and important is taking dating away from being a binary. So it can be very easy to go into a date and say essentially this date is a success if we move to the next level, like a video game, and this date is a failure if one or both of us reject the other person. And I think through that process, it can be very easy to make the stakes of a date, my identity, my attractiveness, my self-esteem are on the line here, and I'm putting myself up for judgment by someone else, and they're doing the same with me. And that can be a really unpleasant and unnecessary way to engage in this process. I think it's really helpful to be able to think, oh, actually, not every member of the population is everyone else's type or preferred person. There might be a whole huge suite of people who you connect with, you find really interesting and really cool, but you're not necessarily, the type of person who you want to proceed with, or someone who you want to kind of go on another date with. Attraction doesn't always work that way. And so I think being able to actually say, dating can be a beautiful process and an experience in and of itself that doesn't have to be a binary. So a date isn't good or bad based on the fact that it proceeded somewhere. It can just be a really amazing way to kind of connect with someone you would have never met otherwise, to learn about their story, to see the world through their eyes, for them to see the world through yours. And a place to just learn about yourself and other people. I think sometimes it can be helpful to spend a little bit of time reframing the way that we look at dating as well, to sort of take the pressure off and make it something that can be a bit more fun. You also have a couple of other things, because I skipped past it.
We love it. We're agile.
Yeah.
Up.
Back.
Left. I'm so bad with my left and right, so I don't know. Here. Okay. So this is, and again, to really like speak to that, not everyone wants to date at the moment, and wonderful. Like, not everyone wants to be in a relationship, wonderful. But if you are, and you're noticing that there's maybe some hesitation, of course, like there is perhaps professional support out there where you could work through your own things. But these are, two questions that I pose to a client who's sort of identifying that. And that is, what's getting in the way between you and feeling sexually confident, or what's getting in the way between you and feeling comfortable to date right now. And that could be a range of things. It could be that you feel like you've lost the skills, like you don't feel confident, you don't know how to meet people, that you're really enjoying being comfortable. Like, it's such an individual thing. But if we can get a little bit closer to what's getting in the way between you and doing that, then, it gives us more space to work with those possibilities there. Because I think going on a date is really awkward. Like, it can be, it's like, it can be really fun. But I once did an experiment on myself to go on 7 dates in 7 days as a way to relearn all of these new skills, and it was actually really useful, and a few of my clients have done that too. But it is that opportunity to go, okay, no pressure here, how am I going to share who I am, enjoy this, and get back into it. So what's getting in the way between me and feeling sexually confident to date? Another is, how is not being vulnerable serving me right now? We're at a time where, you'll go on Instagram and see all the therapists there, and it'll be like, vulnerability, you've got to be vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is actually a choice, that I don't think we have to be vulnerable with everyone. Not everyone is deserving of our vulnerability. So how is not being vulnerable and not being open useful for me right now? And that can sort of work to celebrate all the other things that you might be doing for yourself, and not just putting the hierarchy of a incredible life on meeting that person. That there's so much joy and pleasure that can come from cultivating and developing a really strong relationship with yourself. So if you're in a similar space, maybe these 2 questions might be useful reflection points for you. If you could, thank you. No, you're doing an amazing job.
So good.
And then just up one. So this is a really a bit of a process or an approach. What can you do to create a sense of safety and a sense of control? And actually, I think these 2 things are really great foundations for a whole range of areas in sex and relationships. When we feel safe, regulated, and in control, I think that's the optimal place to really release into pleasure and to have a great time. So asking yourself, what do I need to do to feel safe? And even just writing a list of that. And what do I need to do to feel like I have a sense of control? And writing a list of those things. And then taking that into however you date. Next slide. Thank you.
I'm wondering if we might want to jump a bit forward as well.
Move it, yeah. These are some, quickly, sex positive affirmations. Sometimes feel a little bit woo, but they are incredibly useful from a thing called neuroplasticity. When you engage in new behaviors, thoughts, or patterns, you rewire your brain. We've got a whole lot of this on the course. So I am sexy, I am sensual in the mirror every day.
Yeah, if you've ever spent any time around things like cognitive behavioural therapy, which is a really useful tool for sort of managing different forms of mental health issues, or moving from kind of surviving to thriving in terms of mental health, this uses a lot of the same kind of general principles as well.
Amazing.
All right. How are we going on time as well?
Okay. Yeah, if anyone wants, these are some communication starting points. If you're wanting, you can take a photo of that, or we'll just send it to you later. It's just like different ways to speak about sex, but this is in the course too, so maybe we can keep going.
Yeah.
2 more. Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, okay, stunning. You're going to need to read these out. These are our... Okay. Yeah, no, this is perfect.
Beautiful.
So, orgasm and arousal. 2 pretty important things when it comes to pleasure. I like to make a distinction between the 2. Orgasm is... Actually, I want to hear from you first.
Yeah, from over here?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you to everyone who submitted answers to questions like, what does an orgasm feel like? We've got a great one here, like a cold shiver, but really warm and brief and twitching.
Nice.
I love the descriptive language.
We should keep these.
Yeah,
this is
I
brilliant.
actually want to publish these. These are awesome. What does an orgasm feel like? Have never had one with a partner, but with myself, it feels like a build-up of tension and that gets released in a satisfying wave, which is a really common story as well, and that's something that maybe we can speak to as well. Do you want to hear more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go 2 more.
So what does pleasure feel like? You know when you have been craving a certain food and that first bite hits the spot, like cheeky waffles. Perfect moment.
You should coin that.
Yeah, you should definitely make
like an
this.
orgasm.
Yeah. And what does an orgasm feel like when you can sneeze? That's actually really great.
Totally.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I used to stick pencils up my nose, and apparently a sneeze is like 1/13 of an orgasm. I don't know the maths on that, but...
Yeah.
So basically, let's define what an orgasm is. An orgasm is a peak moment of pleasure. So for some people, it may feel like that full body experience, like a big peak of pleasure. For others, it might just feel a little bit more like that. But what we're really looking at is that peak moment of intensity, of pleasure or sensation. Orgasm is really different to arousal. So arousal is a physiological response. So when we're talking about sexual arousal, that could look like your cheeks becoming flushed, feeling more hot, your heart rate doubling, your pain threshold doubling, your genitals becoming engorged or erect or lubricated. So all of these physiological responses. I think it's important to make that distinction because often the more arousal you build in your body, the more pleasure you'll feel and the more orgasmic you can be as well. And I think this is one of the most common things that orgasm is one of the most common reasons that people will seek support from a professional, whether they're coming too quickly, not coming at all, being pre-orgasmic, their body is responding in unexpected ways, and there are a range of different approaches that we can take in order to support you in feeling, really great in your body. Often it could be, maybe some therapeutic approaches or modalities. Masturbation is an incredible tool to learn about your body and to learn the pleasure and stimulation that you want and need. Mindfulness practices, so a key concern for many people is feeling like they're, as soon as it comes to sex or masturbation, they're out of their body, in their head, on the dirty room, the uni list of things to do, and that can be, really dysregulating. It can take you out of that present moment, and you perhaps don't even acknowledge or know what pleasure and sensation you're currently feeling. So there are so many things that you can do. I think to answer that person's question around, or maybe a really common question that you've either never experienced orgasm with a partner or you've never experienced orgasm at all, lots of people will ask me, am I that one person who will just never be able to experience this? And every single person who I've worked with who has that concern has always been able to experience more pleasure and even orgasm. But there are just a lot of things that, you have to do and try in order to learn about your body and experience that. So there's so much out there. In terms of other sort of approaches, there's body mapping, which is, bringing awareness and mapping out sensation in your body. You could start with that on your arm, your hands, your chest, your stomach, your genitals, mindful masturbation practices, breath, movement, sound, touch. There's really so much you can do, and I think it's more useful to get a sense of, what works for you and your body, rather than just saying, this technique
the
makes
recipe.
everyone come.
Yeah.
Because it is really different.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about working in this space is, you know, while we might all have, you know, actually you're all probably too young, oh my gosh, but while, you know, I think some of the ways that we are sometimes taught to think about pleasure are like, you know, top 10 tips and tricks that always work. And those can be helpful, those can level up your knowledge of anatomy, those can teach you techniques that might work for you, might work with a partner. The most important thing that you can do whenever you are sort of exploring either your own body or meeting someone new and exploring their body is spending time listening and creating an environment where either you're comfortable kind of feeling pleasure signals from yourself or someone else is comfortable telling you what they're feeling, because our bodies are really diverse. I do think that a couple of things that are always really helpful and can be quite big unlocks just because of the media environment that we live in, is, you know, building up a little bit of media literacy around what you see in porn, what you see in pop culture, versus what is sort of more likely to produce pleasure for different anatomies. So like a lot of what we'll see in pornography, so if you're thinking about pornography that might be featuring like someone with a penis and a vulva, you often see mainly penetrative sex. And you know, while that can be orgasmic for some people, and it's about 30% of the population, if you're a person with a vulva who will orgasm from that, actually sort of incorporating clitoral stimulation is the sort of important part for about 80% of people to feel orgasmic. So that can be a really useful kind of reset. And similarly, if you're a person with a penis, so I think a lot of the time we sort of treat sexuality is a little bit simple for people with penises because it can be a little easier to, on average, sort of have an orgasm, but it can also mean that we're not sensitized to all of the other erogenous zones and all of the other types of orgasms that you might be able to have as well. So sort of learning about, you know, what's the role of the prostate, or, you know, what's sometimes referred to as the P-spot, sort of equivalent of the G-spot in someone with a vulva. Now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole because the G-spot isn't a spot. So there's a lot to learn about that as well. Again, feel free to check out our course because Georgia does a great job of explaining some of this kind of anatomy that we all missed in school because we sort of learned how to prevent pregnancy but not how to have good sex. And so I think it can be really helpful to even spend a little bit of time understanding that anatomy, understanding, you know, what are the different erogenous zones, and then spending time understanding for a partner and for yourself what works, what's going to be exciting, what feels good to you as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's move right along.
Moving on. Then we'll get to your questions.
Cool. Desire.
Yeah, desire.
Big one.
So desire and arousal, not the same thing. And that might be a nice place to start as well. What's the difference between desire and arousal?
So arousal, as I said before, is a physiological response, changes in your body. Desire is essentially a wanting or an urge for sex. And I think often people will conflate the two, being, oh, I'm aroused, my body is either erect, engorged, lubricated. Does that mean I want sex? No, like this is actually something called arousal non-concordance. So anytime your body responds to arousal in an unexpected way or an unwanted way, we can't turn to our bodies, we can't turn to our genitals to tell us whether we're consenting or desiring sex. So there is a real difference. And sometimes our bodies respond to sex stimulus. So say, for example, cheeky waffles, like that could be a stimulus. You may feel your heart rate doubling. You may feel some engorgement in your genitals looking at that. But it doesn't necessarily mean you want to have sex with the waffle, necessarily. You might.
Nothing wrong with it. We love it.
It's actually...
Just probably not out here.
Yeah, not here in your private space. That's actually a thing called sploshing. So it's like play with food. Can be a really fun thing. I don't know if that's a part of the branding, but we went there anyway. So desire is another really, really common reason that people will seek professional support from a sexologist, sex coach, or sex therapist. Can you hear that?
I can.
Yeah. If anyone's nervous systems are feeling uneasy, I think it's a mic or something. It's not a bee. But yeah, so desire is essentially the wanting for sex. And it is a common concern that people have. And I like to make the distinction between a few different ways of experiencing desire. So desire can be experienced on a spectrum, really. At one end, spontaneous desire. So that refers to a spontaneous urge for sex that seemingly comes out of nowhere. I think if we look at the start of a relationship as one example, sometimes you identify, oh, like, I am really attracted to this person and I want to have sex with them right now and I'm thinking about sex all the time. It's kind of spontaneous in that it doesn't require too much stimulation. Then we have responsive, and that refers to how much stimulus your body needs in order to bring sex front of mind. So that could be receiving, much better, thank you, receiving a really hot, steamy kiss, someone going down on you for 30 minutes. It could be someone organizing a really romantic picnic, or knowing that you're going to go home and they're going to be dressed up in something sexy. Like, it refers to how much stimulus your body needs to think, sex is a great idea right now. And when we look at it as a spectrum, it allows for, we're all really familiar with the idea of spontaneous desire. And I think people will misdiagnose themselves as saying, I've got no desire, I've got no libido, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. What perhaps could be useful is to make a distinction between the two and where you feel you're currently sitting. But then also looking at sort of what's going on in the brain and what's going on in the body. And we all have our brakes and accelerators. So basically a sexual excitation system, which means your body is scanning your environment for everything that is sexually relevant and appealing. These are the things we call your accelerators. And I think that's actually on the next slide. And then we have the opposite side of that, your sexual inhibition system, which is scanning your environment for everything that says sex is not a great idea right now. And here are some examples. And when I'm working in session with people, we literally write these out and we think, oh, maybe it's not that you've got no libido, maybe it's not that you're not attracted to your partner, maybe it's that you've got too many breaks, too many things that are stopping you from feeling like you can relax or enjoy or bring sex front of mind. So how can we gently remove some of those breaks and bring in some more accelerators so that, maybe that's a date night, a full body massage, feeling confident. Really, it'll be so, you might be looking at some of these and be like, that's my break. And you might be looking at some of these and be like, that's my accelerator. We're all really, really different. Anything to add on that?
I agree. I mean, I think stress is a classic one. Probably for the majority of the population that works as a break. For some people, it can actually be an accelerator that makes you want sex more or feel more desire. So it's definitely a true point that they can be both. I think the only other thing to note here is these are very diverse depending on the person. So, there are people who will have sort of moderately sensitive brakes and accelerators. There are people who actually have super sensitive brakes. So it is really easy for a single thing to distract me and suddenly I'm out of the moment and I don't feel like sex anymore. There are people who will say, I have really sensitive accelerators and it's very easy for me to feel sort of quite turned on quite quickly. And so understanding, where do you fall on that spectrum, how do those things operate for you, and what's going to let you experience desire in the way that you want to experience it, and how do you want to kind of create the context for desire, is really helpful. And I think really helpful to just kind of do that re-education away from libido as a fixed thing to actually this is something that emerges from the environment that we set up for ourselves and the sort of triggers that we put in our environment.
And what you just said there around the context, you've done this before, haven't you? Desire, you may have been served some ads on Instagram about libido pills or things like that, and they are all terrible, disgusting, don't work, don't take them, because desire isn't something that can be fixed with a pill. It's something that is around your context, and that is, all about them making money on some, $70 vitamins. And so many people have come to me and have said, oh, I feel really broken now because not even these vitamins are working for me. There's nothing wrong with you. It's not about you. You're not broken. It's just that we aren't educating or speaking about desire in an accurate way, whereby it's about creating the context for you to feel like you can release, enjoy, and bring sex front of mind.
Absolutely. And I think maybe a note to end on, so then we can jump onto some questions, would be, the modern world is actually full of breaks. Like if you think about the fact that you have devices that are always on, that are constantly demanding your attention, if you think about how stressful modern life can be, if you think about the fact that we've all just lived through a once in 100-year, 2-year pandemic experience where lots of people have had financial and mental health and emotional and familial and existential stress. This is a time where lots of people are struggling with these types of issues particularly, and that's really natural. So it can actually be really helpful to kind of spend time thinking about what will allow you to kind of counteract the way that the modern world works as well. All right, now we can jump into questions. Do we have questions? Where are the questions?
Do you want me to get the Q&A slips?
That would be awesome.
Oh, yeah. I think there may be some in the bowl already.
Yeah, if you pull them up, and if anyone has more questions, feel free to write them down. I think there are still some more papers up there.
Also, if you're very, very welcome to ask them to all of us if you want, if you feel comfortable, but you also don't have to.
Anyone want a slip? Yeah, I'll just pass them down the line, and if you take one and you really want to keep it honest, you won't know.
Amazing. I'm also just conscious of time, so if you're sort of at a point where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm late for dinner, please run off, but also we'll stay and answer questions for a while longer.
And we have prizes. Waffles, games.
Okay, oh, we've got a great one.
Cool.
All right, maybe we'll just give people a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
I actually might grab a cheeky Prosecco.
Do you want me to grab it for you?
No, I'll get it.
Okay.
It's all good. 1 second. I'm just going to grab a drink. Do you want one? You okay? Okay. Easy. All right. Should we get started?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a couple of first questions, but feel free to chat while you're thinking about it. Okay.
I prefer and are more turned on by being dominated. Okay. So
Amazing, thank you.
this is a really great question. I prefer and am more turned on by being dominated, but so does my partner. So both people in this relationship like to be in the role that is more dominant. Any tips for navigating this? So I think, there's really so much that you can do here, but one initial thing that comes to mind is making a distinction between wanting and willing. So you're both wanting to dominate here, and perhaps maybe you set aside a time where you say, okay, wanting is the opportunity that I receive. When I'm in this role, it's for me, I'm getting the pleasure, the joy out of it. But then when it comes to willing, that's any time you're still excited, enthusiastic, and consenting to be there, but you're acknowledging that I'm willing to do this, and perhaps I'm in more of the giving role. So how can you create a framework whereby anyone in the relationship has the opportunity to be both wanting and receiving, and then willing and giving? And this can be sort of worked out through a great resource that is Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, that it even has sort of 4 different roles that you can experience. But I think this is a really common question, and people may assume, does that mean that we're not sexually compatible? And absolutely not. I think it's just getting really clear on when you're receiving and when you're giving, so that everyone can have that opportunity, because there's also a lot of joy that can come from giving. And when we talk about being a good lover, I think people will often assume that you're the best kind of lover when you're really good at giving or really good at doing. And sure, that's one part of it, but it also takes, being able to be in the receiving role too, so that you get all of those wonderful experiences, because there are different experiences that can be felt when you're in those different roles. So getting clear on what is giving for you and what is receiving for you. So giving in this case might be being more submissive, and receiving in this case might be being more dominant. Of course, that's like a massive assumption. You'd need to figure that out within the relationship, but then getting a sense of what you can do to be in both roles.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a true point about compatibility in general as well, that sometimes we can leap to we're not compatible with a partner. But there are so many axes that sexuality exists on, and so many axes that like preferences exist on, that it's really unlikely to find any person who is perfectly compatible in your mirror or your match on all of those things. And great partnerships and great sexual relationships can come from people finding the ways to make it work that make sense for them as well. Okay, I have another great one. Does orgasm feel different at different ages?
Yeah, totally. I think orgasm always feels different. There's lots of things that go on here. When the more you know your body, the more changes. The older you get. Lots of people. I have lots of clients who are like 60s, 70s, and they're saying that they're having the best orgasms ever. For my clients who are pregnant, some identify that it is really, really intense and pleasurable. But I think orgasm always kind of changes, and like you might have one incredible experience and then 2 hours later or a week later, it might not be as it was. Our bodies are constantly changing, and there's a range of different things that go into that. How we're feeling in our bodies, the amount of arousal, the context that we're in, what we're doing to stimulate. But I think you can always experience more pleasure. You can always learn more about your body. And I do really love hearing about like 70-year-olds who are just having like the best sex of their lives. It's like, It's only going to get better for us.
I mean, absolutely. And I think, given how much of a skill sexual communication is, given how much time it can take to discover what you like and get comfortable, it makes sense that actually for so many people at that point of your life, you are the most comfortable you've ever been, saying what you like, what you need, what you want, and actually relaxing into that situation. And we know that when your like fight or flight system, so when your like sympathetic nervous system is at its most relaxed, that's generally when a lot of people experience really sort of heightened pleasure. So that can also be a really big driver too. We've got a really kind of, I think, common,
Thank
great.
you.
Just loving it. Keep them coming.
Maybe we'll have to do short answers.
Yeah, okay. So this is a really common one. I feel like I want to spice things up in the bedroom with my long-term partner, but I don't know what I like. Do you have any tips to figure it out, or ideas of where to start?
Do you want to start on this one?
I think this is an awesome question, and I really love the way that this person has framed it as well, which is, how do I start discovering and exploring this? One tool that can be really helpful is actually to think about things like practice and play sessions. So a lot of the time when we think about sex, we think, all sex has to be in the moment, heated, like Bridgerton to porn, whatever your preferred stimulus is, very passionate and like on. And that can be amazing, but it can also be useful to have sessions where you're saying, hey, we're trying something new, we're going to be deliberately clunky, we're going to over communicate, I'm going to tell you exactly whether it's working or not, some things will work, some won't, we'll have a laugh about it, and really kind of inviting the ability to try out new things without it feeling like it puts too much pressure or it puts too much stakes on the interaction. So I think that can be really powerful. There's also a lot of resources you can look at to think, what might I be interested in? And you've got some really good ones for this as well.
Yeah, even if I think like the moment before that, when you say, okay, how do I even bring this up? I'm really nervous as to how they're going to respond. And I really like to find ways to horizontalize things. So it may be, hey, I heard this really interesting thing, or I was at this talk tonight and this topic came up and it got me thinking, I'm curious, how do you feel about that? Is that interesting or exciting at all for you? And often creating a context for a sexual conversation. So for some people that might mean, hey, I'd love to speak about this, when's a good time to talk with you? Or you might know that your partner or sex playmate would get way too anxious thinking about there was a set time to talk, so you might find a time that like is at dinner or on a walk or while you're driving, getting a sense of when would feel safe and having that conversation. Often when you're trying something new, it's not that one conversation and then you go and do it. Sometimes it is discussing, communicating, going away, sourcing some information, coming back with questions, talking more about it, that there is a lot that you can do. It's your sex life, so you can co-create it. So whatever you want to do together, consenting, you can do it. But there is a lot of information out there, and I find it's always really easy to be like, listen to a great podcast and they were talking about this thing and I'm curious, how do you feel about that? And you might be surprised, they might also have thought about this thing as well and just didn't know how to bring it up. If you don't ask, you may not get.
Yeah. One other thing I'd suggest as well, we did make this course. It's called The Modern Guide to Sex. It's like answering the most common questions we get, and this is a really common one. There's a resource in there that can be really helpful, which is basically like an A to Z list of as many sexual things as we could think of, and then like a set of columns that are like yes, no, I need more information, or a maybe. And that can actually be a really fun exercise to do with a partner. It can be sexy, it can be silly. That can be a nice way to actually say, well, here's a bunch of things that I didn't even know what that was, but great. And here's a bunch of things that I would be curious about trying. Here's a bunch of things that are never going to be for me, and really going through that together. And one of the pieces of feedback that we hear a lot of the time from people in long-term relationships is, it can be hard to bring up having sex in a different way because it feels like it can feel like criticism of the way that you have been having sex. And I think sometimes having a third presence or a stimulus or that kind of other person in the room, or even a course to react to or a book to react to or a podcast or a TV show or whatever the thing is, can be a nice way to bring up that conversation in a way that doesn't feel like criticism. It feels like something you can co-create. Oh, great question.
I just remembered I'd heard somewhere there was something on the internet like that where it like emails you and your partner only on things you say yes to.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So that is a really awesome option as well. So then you can just
Love
get the
that.
here is the green light on all of the things that we both are interested in trying, and then have a play session and see what you think. But that's a great
Cool.
suggestion.
If you remember, I'd love to hear what that resource is. I feel like lots of people would benefit. And there's also some great apps out there where they ask you a sex question and then it somehow gives the answer to your partner only once everyone involved has answered it. There's so much technology, You're the generation creating it.
But yeah, I think those can all be really nice ways to do it. And I think the most important thing is remember, this can be a fun conversation and come into it in a way that feels fun and enjoyable for you. It doesn't need to be a high pressure conversation as well. All right, next question. I'm a sexual being. I love the idea of sex and being sexy and the aesthetic around it. But when I play into that with a partner, I feel fake and get in my head. I have a much easier time orgasming when I'm focused and completely still. How do I overcome this?
Yeah, so I think there's a few pieces in there, being a sexual person and what that means for you. So your idea of being a sexual human will be really different to the next person. It might look like what we see in images or in porn or in movies, but it might also be completely different to that and intrinsic to who you are. Anytime you're getting in your head, I find that often it's really useful to draw on modalities of mindful sex, mindfulness, mindful masturbation that supports you in not kind of getting hard on yourself for thinking about something else. It's really, really normal and human that you're in the middle of something that you might get distracted, but it's just finding ways to gently come back to your body. Another process that sort of draws on more of the somatic, so that's my training. Somatic essentially means bringing awareness to the body, is asking yourself the question, what am I noticing in my body? What is my body trying to tell me? What would feel really useful right now? So that instead of, acknowledging these ideas around what being sexual, what that looks like and feels like for you, but also doing a little bit of an inquiry as to what that feels like for you, what feels most sexual, when you feel most confident. Did I answer that question? I feel like that was
No, I think you did. And some things I could add as well would be, there can be a lot of reasons why, and this person hasn't necessarily specified exactly why they might feel in their head during sex with a partner. Obviously one of them can be feeling like you're playing, scripts that you've seen from porn and pop culture and not feeling like you're part of them, or not feeling like they represent you. So it can be really helpful to actually think, how can I diversify what I'm watching? Are there sources of sort of ethical, amateur, diverse erotica and pornography that might be suitable for me? Are there different things in pop culture that I want to take a look at? That can be one. It can also be, and I think this is a really common thing, a lot of people feel very confident in everyday life, but when it comes to sex and sexuality, that feels like a new space, and it feels like you're sort of having to learn to feel confident and express yourself all over again. And it's like, you know, learning a new language, like sexual communication can be like learning a new language. And even I think feeling observed can be a challenge for people. So if you're thinking like, oh, that's the issue for me, is feeling watched during sex. Sometimes actually a good intermediate step can be like, can we try sex with a blindfold, just so I can get that experience of not getting into my head and not feeling like I have to perform for someone else, and then see where you go from there. So I know that kind of can sound, you know, unexpectedly kinky, which is great, but also can be an interesting tool. So I think get a little bit creative about what do you think is standing in your way, and then what might be some sort of practical solutions that you might be able to use to build more comfort and confidence in that experience with a partner. And also bring your partner into that conversation, because I'm sure they'd be really keen to hear as well.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay, we're gonna...
And then we can answer them in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really sorry that we didn't get to all of these, but we will find a way to get to all of them. How do you orgasm with a partner? Classic.
Great question. I mean, this really, really depends on you and your body. So by the question, how do you orgasm with a partner? It sounds like you're already orgasming on your own. So what are you doing on your own? Like, how are you touching yourself? Is it external stimulation rather than internal stimulation? What are you doing to create the space? How slow, how fast are you moving? What tools are you bringing into it? Not enough people are using lube. Lube is absolutely essential for all kinds of sex. And luckily, lubes, if you want to have a little bit of a try before you buy, actually, I think we've got prizes anyway. Yeah. But lube used to be like really sticky and tacky and like feel weird and make your genitals feel weird. But now they're amazing products that are body safe, that are just there to like make sex really, really good. So using lots of lube, what other tools do you need to bring into it? So if you are orgasming on your own with toys, how can you integrate that into sexual experiences? Making sure that you're bringing this awareness to your body that is, you know, so common to think, what does it look like down there? What does it smell like down there? Oh, they've been down there for 3 minutes. Like, I should, you know, bring them up. Or is this okay for them? And that's so human. But, you know, what can you do to feel safe into releasing and receiving into that pleasure? Communicating and asking for what you want. So as Lou said, having a practice and a play session. Maybe you're practicing with your hand and being like, oh, like that feels really pleasurable when you go between my fingers, or I really like it when you use your fingernails here. Getting really descriptive, even bossy around the kind of stimulation that you want to receive. And then maybe trying it somewhere else that feels a little bit more edgy, whether that's your chest or your nipples, your stomach, maybe even going to the genitals. You have to learn how to be a good lover, and there is this assumption that it should just work and you should just, you know, come simultaneously if you're really, you know, into this person. But it is a skill and it is a practice, and there's a lot that you can do for more practical. I feel like I've said this 1,000 times. There are literally so many practices that you can try in the course too.
Yeah.
What did I miss?
I think that's great. The only other thing I'd say is one of the things that does come out a lot in sex therapy and sex coaching is that obviously orgasms are awesome and wonderful, but sometimes we can be a bit orgasm-centric as a culture, and again, we can kind of make the measure of whether sex was good or bad. You know, did I have an orgasm? Did my partner have an orgasm? Yes, no. And it can be helpful, and this is actually a form of treatment that is often used when people are struggling with orgasm, or even struggling with things like erectile dysfunction, so struggling to kind of build and maintain erections, or struggling with feeling aroused. It can be really helpful to actually say, let's deliberately take orgasm off the table, and let's have a session that is just focused on pleasure and enjoyment rather than the pursuit of an orgasm. And sometimes that can actually be a really good way to rebuild connection and sort of actually get you to that point too, but also create an experience that feels more enjoyable and less fraught as well. Yeah. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you all so much for coming tonight and for staying for a slightly extended Q&A session. But we'll be up here, and I think we'll find a way to get answers on these remaining questions to you, whether it's by email or socials or something. So we'll make sure those come to you. We should do a takeover or something. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.